with Andrew, so the Chinese spy stuff, that sort of kicked off in the news again recently. Yep. For someone who's never heard about any of that, like what's a very basic explanation of like what's gone on there?
Well, what you would say is that, well, there's actually two ways of looking at it. The first, the factual thing that we have is that Andrew was friends with somebody who was posing as a Chinese businessman, but was in fact a member of the Communist Party who'd essentially infiltrated Andrew's circle and was potentially feeding information back to the Chinese. But members of the royal family, members of the government, were quite relaxed about it on the grounds that Andrew was too stupid to know what he was getting involved in. Okay. But secondly, he was never involved with he was never trusted because of his stupidity to be given any kind of information that would actually be of any damage to national security. So you would have an awful lot about Andrew's ambitions for his life and about what he wanted to do and about how he despised this member or that member of his family. But you wouldn't have anything that was of any use or any actual damage. But the Chinese spy thing, it's not over because obviously we don't know the full extent of the contact that Andrew had. We know very limited amounts of it. I mean, you just think to yourself, it's dreadful, isn't it? Because if it's somebody who's a member of the government, you can vote them out. A member of the royal family, you can't vote them out. So even if they have disappeared from being a working royal, they're still there. Like the unpleasant, stain on the back of your shoe, you can't get rid of it.
Is this echoes of the concerns we've often had about the royals? Edward, was accused of working with the Nazis. Was that right?
Well, King Edward VIII, after he abdicated and became Duke of Windsor, it wasn't so much that he was a Nazi spy, but it was more that he had an audience with Hitler in 1937. But you can see it's the same principle. It's the same idea of arrogance, the same idea of not listening to anyone around you, and also the idea that the royal family has always been an unaccountable organisation. I mean, we don't have the strictures in place. I mean, I'll give you an example. I spent quite a lot of time over the last few years at the Royal Archives in Windsor Castle. And if you're a historian, you have to go through all of these hoops to be able to be allowed to go in there, but it's worth it when you do. But the only thing is that there's no catalogue, no publicly available catalogue of what's there. You have to send an email to the archivist saying what you want to look at, and then they will give you some files about it. But certain things, like for instance, the Duke of Kent died in a plane crash in 1942 in the middle of World War II. The circumstances are very mysterious. They're very, very uncertain. And I asked if I could see the files. Oh, we don't have any. None, not a single file about the death of a member of a royal family in active service. No, nothing. So you can see that we do not have full transparency. We don't have anything close to full transparency. And I know that my fellow author Andrew Larman has, of course, been trying to get this transparency out there. But I can't see it happening anytime soon because the royal family would say, well, we don't need to. We're not answerable to people who would be doing things like the Official Secrets Act or anything like that.
Yeah, Andrew was saying, and because it's not fresh in my memory, so tell me how that worked. I think it was he expected after a certain number of years, 70 odd, that certain files should be available, and they weren't.
Yes, I mean, you would expect that. But then on the other hand, I suppose what it's going to be is, I mean, for instance, I found another file, which is bizarrely at Balliol College in Oxford, which is about an assassination attempt on Edward VIII. Mm-hmm. And what transpired was the assassination attempt was either organised or at the very least tacitly permitted by MI5. Wow. Because they hated Edward VIII so much that if he could be got rid of by this man who was one of their informants, so be it. And of course, that would never, ever, ever have come into the public domain. But what so happened was the National Archives had some MI5 documents, and Balliol had this memoir written by the would-be assassin. You put them together, and you've got two sides of a jigsaw. So it's no coincidence, I think, that after my book came out, the MI5 documents were taken off again and have now been put back into cold storage. So if you want the story, you've got to read my book to find it out.
There's secretive stuff going on, isn't there? And it's interesting because I suppose the big tabloidy sensational story is Andrew and Epstein, which is, of course, a huge story. They are talking at the moment about the list coming out. That seems to happen every few months. This list is coming out and then it doesn't. It must be because of so-and-so's on the list. We have no idea. No one seems to know. But from talking to you and I suppose other royal biographers and things, it seems to be the real story, or at least a story of equal import, is what he was up to on all these trade goings on, and that's another thing. Andrew Loney wasn't able to get any access to those. That should all be public record, shouldn't it?
Of course it should, but the trouble is now is that because he has removed himself from the public domain and he's not getting any kind of public funding, he would argue that and again, this is the same as with Prince Harry, that although you are a member of the royal family, a public organisation, a public institution, you are a private citizen within that organisation. It's a very strange place to be, because essentially you are saying, I'm going to use the circumstances of my birth, the circumstances of my background, to make contacts, to obtain financially advantageous situations for myself, and quite possibly to be able to be in a position that I'm committing illegal acts with no fear of retribution, because, there's never been a member of the royal family prosecuted for a crime. There's been minor things like the Princess Royal's dogs getting off a leash and biting people, but there's never been anything that would ever have resulted in a custodial sentence or anything like that. And you think, well, but what would happen if they did? I think that in the case of Andrew, there might very well have been crimes committed. At the very least, trafficking and sleeping with underage girls. Those are crimes. Those are crimes that should result in a prison sentence.
Do we know he did that?
We don't know he did that, but that seems to be the consensus. Well, I can't say it's a consensus until it's proved. But on the other hand, you would, if any of the stuff about Virginia Giuffre is true, and the fact that he settled out of court for a lot of money suggests that at the very least there might be no liability of guilt, but there's still a desire to want to make it go away, you have to ask, okay, well, if you're so certain about your innocence, why didn't you let the case go through? And the answer is almost certainly that something would have been said in court, either by him or somebody else, who would then have opened the doors to a criminal case. Now, of course, he might have been acquitted in court. He might have been seen as innocent, and that might have been able to restore his reputation that way, but I doubt it.
And you'd imagine, because of how he's been so bullish in everything else, that if he really were innocent, and this is just my conjecture here, that he would have actually just fought that all the way.
Well, he wanted to.
Oh, right.
That's the thing. He wanted to go to court, and he was saying right up to the last minute, I want to clear my name, because I think he was essentially told, can you go to court and be certain of victory? If you can be 100% certain of victory, you should go to court. If you're 99% certain of victory, we have to settle the case out of court. And of course, it's impossible to say, because there has never been a proper, scrutinous. There's never been a proper scrupulous scrutiny of the facts.
Scrupulous scrutiny.
Scrupulous scrutiny, yes.
Sounds like an album by the Streets or something.